And I'm going to begin by saying hello and welcome to TGI, a online reading series that has been going since March of this year. Has never met in person, but has been here consistently for four to build some form of community during this time when we are all forced into distancing and isolation, and frankly further isolation than artistic people normally go into, because creative people do tend to spend some time on their own creating, right? Anyway, my name is Rich Cressmo. The most important thing you can know about me today is I cut my own hair today, so I'm sorry. um, and I will be the host for this, based solely on the fact that my lovely partner Trina Thibodeau told me I had to host it back in March, because I have the big microphone. Mhm. And for those of you who may be here for the first time, the show meets every Friday at this time. You can find us on Twitter at TGIcast, or you can go to tgicast.com for more information. And the way the show works fundamentally is we usually have four artists or writers. It's mostly writers, although we have had photographers and some other people, join in and share some of their work. Um, each of them will present something about, or a piece or multiple pieces by them, 10 or 15 minutes, and then I will jump back in. And I usually offer some form of response or question or something, just to get a little discussion going. It's not a full, interview, but I do like to pry about in the heads of creative people. And then we will move on to the next one. Why did I say that? That's weird. My brain went in 8 directions at once. I should not have the chat open while I'm trying to speak extemporaneously. At any rate, tonight, we are very excited. We have a group of writers, all of whom have chapbooks coming out or having come out from Woodland Arts Editions of Oneonta. These writers are David Bachner, Lynne Keeman, yes, Julene Waffle, and Vicki Whicker. This publication project, just a little information, it grew from Woodland Arts Editions collaborations with the Seeing Things Poetry Workshop of Bright Hill Press and Literary Center in the Catskills. Fine arts publisher David Hayes of the Oneonta-based Argian Press contributed design and production services for the books and for the 136-page volume of workshop members' works, Seeing Things, an Anthology of Poetry, which was published this past summer by Woodland Arts Editions. These 5 books were edited by the workshop director Robert Benson and printed at the Village Printer in Oneonta. So it's all very local, very communal, which is something we always like to see. And we're very excited to sort of hear from these different voices who happen to meet at this literary center. The initial reader unfortunately had a family emergency. So some of the other contributors are going to read a little bit of her work, but I think it is important that, the links to her work be posted, and that, she get a chance to be represented here as well. So, whew, I didn't take a breath in for too long. Sorry. The first reader tonight, or first contributor tonight, is Vicki Wicker, who is a poet and art photographer, and she's a member of the Los Angeles Poets and Writers Collective and Bright Hill Press Poets. Her poetry has been published by Mo+th, 12 Los Angeles Poets, Big City Mantra, Literary Mama, and more. Both her poetry and art photography are featured in the anthology Seeing Things, previously mentioned, this past summer from Woodland Arts Editions, and her long-form poem Firestarter was recently published in both English and Spanish in La Presa. Caught Before Flight is her latest collection of poems. Now, which one of the readers would like to share a piece of Vicki's work? Okay, so Lynne's going to help us out with that one. Should be ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Actually, the other 3 of us are going to read pieces of Vicki's work, but this is the earliest one in Caught Before Flight. And this one's called Woody Wagon. We are 4 across in the back seat. Toddler needs siblings, vacation burnt and bruised. From left to right, we get bigger, angrier, boy, girl, boy, boy. In the heat glazed morning, a bumblebee inspects us, freckles, dirt wiped Dirt swiped cheeks and exits, nothing sweet. I lean hard over the littlest boy, nauseated by his stickiness. I need to see your mom, my granny, one last time. Y'all hurry back now, she southern sings as the scenery swims in reverse. Granddaddy, goddamn solemn, as a carved Indian, lets jock his poodle, snarl his goodbyes. Daddy toots the horn and we are off. And by the time we hit a 2-lane, Daddy's twisted a purple horsebite into the tender of your tan thigh. You slap at him with the Rand McNally, that origami of anger unfolding us inch by inch. North Carolina to Florida, slow going, like holding your breath in the deep end until your heart explodes. Night falls, black as static on the AM radio. The second poem of Vicki's that I'm going to read is called Caught Before Flight, and that's the title of her chapbook as well. Lake of the Ozarks, a sparkle of sun on blue water, clouds that muscle the horizon. I still have that photograph. I stand with Dad on a dock behind us. The people of summer drift in their boats. He holds my waist, and we pose as his arm keeps the distance between us. I tilt my head away, let the breeze play with my hair, my hands at my waist. 2 turtle doves caught before flight. He wears jeans and oil-stained boat shoes. I go barefoot in denim cutoffs, my new breasts pressed into the pastels of my tube top. Behind the camera, Mom captures Dad's face in a stiff grin. He can no longer cover me up. With guilt, with clothing, with his eyes. This is my summer of love. He is my chauffeur. Over his left shoulder, 2 speedboat boys grin like wolves at my abundance. I look into the camera's eye and smile. Summer begins. Days spent skinny dipping in secret coves with local boys who shimmer like minnows. The blonde-haired boy's fingers desperate to enter my dreams. Nights full of stars pasted into the distant sky. Beer kisses from the dark-haired boy in the back of a boat, rocked by the oily water and our struggles. The storm hits late, the 3rd of July. Heat lightning first, torrential rains by morning. Leaves drop into the lake with the weight of the wind. We leave before dawn, with the car's heater up full blast. We race in silence down slick back roads towards home, as if, with so much speed, they could leave behind what I had found. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn, for helping out. Vicki mentioned to me in the chat just now that she may be available for audio comment after some of her reading. She's just obviously dealing with a real life situation at the moment. Vicki, are you able to speak right now? Possibly not. It's okay. I tell you what, why don't Vicki, if you want to message me, we will maybe check in at the end because I know some of your other poems are going to be read as well. So we'll why don't we do that? All right. This is a bit unusual, but you know, we are adaptable. Noli has just posted all of Vicki's information in the chat if you want to go check out her work and her website. And then also just brief recommendation that everyone, if you don't have the chat open, that's sort of where some amount of live discussion can occur. So people feel free to chime in. All right. So our next reader is David Bachner. David Bachner, his poetry and prose center on place. He was born in the Bronx, grew up on the Jersey Shore, studied in Japan, and traveled throughout Asia as an undergraduate before receiving his degree in philosophy from Bates College. After Peace Corps service in Korea, David worked at the University of Hawaii's Center for Cross-Cultural Training and Research, preparing volunteers for Peace Corps assignments throughout Asia and the Pacific. He then completed a Ph.D. in organizational behavior at Case Western Reserve University and devoted his career to international education as Vice President of Youth for Understanding International Exchange, Dean of Global Studies at Hartwick College, and Scholar in Residence in International Communication at American University's School of International Service. David has authored and co authored 3 books and a number of articles on international education and intergroup relations. His poetry was recently published by Woodland Arts Editions, and he currently lives in Washington, D.C. So, David, my understanding is you have your own work, and you may also read something from Vicki as well.
Yes, thank you, Ridge, very much, and in particular thanks to Noli for facilitating this for the 4 of us, 3+1, to participate. And I think I'll start by reading a poem of Vicki's, which I've always really liked to hear. So now I'll get to read it, and you'll get to hear it. This poem is called Paella. Paella means for you, he says, and I try not to drink the bottle of wine, but fail. Further intoxicated by the smoky brine of his dish, we kiss, and his tongue is crazy, delicious. I might have a thirst to slake. My first paella was in Spain, in a dark bar in Alicante. A business lunch that took forever. Finally, paella, sizzling in a wide pan, but salty, overcooked brown, an impossible swallow. A memorable mediocrity. But this is Paella de Antonio, a garish party, a whiff of chaos, a sublime of seafood, clams in their shell, swollen rice, toothsome yet tender, a dish so wild with desire that it survives the centuries. On the way to bed, black dress and push-up bra fall. You first, he says, I want you naked. But he is dressed like a cowboy in button shirt and latigo belt, looking like what he is, the gentleman from Mendoza, a contrast to my Midwest and white, as rounded as the grains of rice, he gilded with saffron, dimpled like the paella pan. I hold my breath, I'm 46. I want his 55 to be the naked one. I need to see patches of fur on his back. I need to know his imperfections like I know my own. But he's smooth, naked, caramel, the color of socarat, the color of the rice that sticks to the paella pan that we scrape and savor with our tongues. And he is hard, he is always hard. You make me hard, he says, and I am wet, I am always wet. You make me wet, I say. His English and my Spanish trip and tangle. We understand less than half of each other's lives, but we understand salt, fat, acid, heat. When he falls asleep, I lift the sheets to inhale our oceans, the deep that we swam in, the warm beaches we tanned on, the worlds we created, rearranged, and lost. And I repeat the word he whispered, sucre, sucre, sucre. At breakfast, when he says we are getting old, he means the people at his reunion in Mendoza. Yes, we are old, I agree. He digs into his eggs, a sexy, hungry man. I taste him warm in my mouth like wine. It's hard to keep a distance, and harder yet to know that I am not fooling anyone. I want this man to remember my name. I want to know I was not alone. I want us to have a perfect union between two cultures, a dish so wild with desire that we survive the centuries. Shall I just continue with mine? Is that the or should you?
Sure. Yes. Apologies. I should have been more, since we're kind of adapting here. So
Yeah, yeah,
if you'd like to
okay,
go on with
that's
your own
fine.
work, and then we can
Okay.
go over to Julene, who I think also is going to share one of Vicky's, and then her own, and then we'll circle back to Lynn at the end. And then that sound all right?
Okay, so I'll continue.
All right. Thank you.
My very un-Vicky-like poems from a chapbook called Capital Ironies. The subtitle is Washington, D.C. Prose and Poems. I live most of the year in Washington and spent summers in upstate New York in Oneonta. So I'll read 4 selections. Judging by their ages. The reflecting pool in Washington is rimmed by memorials to presidents and wars. Lincoln's faces Washington's, Jefferson's is off in the distance on the far side of the tidal pool. I follow Lincoln's sculpted gaze to the Vietnam Memorial, almost hidden in a hollow to the left. An older gentleman lectures a group of teenagers in Vietnamese. He's impassioned. His charges seem bored. Is the elder a veteran of that war, of the North, the South? Is he praising the names on the wall or cursing them? Are the youngsters so passive because they've heard it all before? Or is it merely the inattention of teenagers with little patience for history? Again, I follow Lincoln's gaze, this time to the right, and walk along a path toward Korea and World War II. A group of Japanese tourists takes photos of a World War II inscription. Americans came to liberate, the inscription reads, not to conquer, to restore freedom and to end tyranny. A few of the Japanese, to judge by their ages, would have been alive during the war. Some perhaps were soldiers. What must they be thinking? America criticizes Japan for honoring its own war dead at Tokyo's Yasukuni Shrine. Would the situation be reversed and the inscription transferable had the Japanese won and Americans were visiting Tokyo? Japanese came to liberate, the inscription might read, not to conquer, but to restore freedom and to end tyranny. A South Korean tour group also listens to a guide at the World War II Memorial. Some, to judge by their ages, would have been alive during that conflict. And what must they be feeling as they watch the nearby Japanese? The older Japanese men likely would have served in the imperial forces that occupied and oppressed Korea for decades and throughout World War II. Certain of the Koreans might have been comfort women. Certain of the Japanese might have used them. A different South Korean group tours the adjacent Korean War Memorial. Most, to judge by their ages, would have experienced the Korean conflict directly. The women as non-combatants fleeing armies, battling up and down the peninsula. The men as soldiers fighting off the invaders from North Korea and China. Across the way, a Chinese tour group listens to their guide. Some of the Chinese, to judge by their ages, could have been soldiers in the Korean War, intent on overrunning the very people who stand opposite them now. China, its geography so vast, its history and politics so complex, it's impossible to know what parts these Chinese might have played in the dramas of the several wars. Allies, enemies, victims, invaders. The memorials are of stone, rigid and well-defined. What the visitors are memorializing is less clear. You'd have to be their ages to understand. You'd have to have lived their experiences. You'd have to speak Vietnamese, or Japanese, or Korean, or Chinese to know. The second selection is called A Park Outside of Class. A middle-class retiree sits on a bench in the shaded triangular park of Pennsylvania Avenue and 19th Street Northwest. He worries about the future. Will his 401k be enough for the long haul? The park is flanked on one side by the World Bank, on another by the International Monetary Fund. The employees of these agencies are pretty much set for the short and long terms. Hefty salaries, generous benefits, travel perks, and for the non-Americans among them, housing and home leave provisions. George Washington University students walk by on their way to class in the institution's high-end facilities clustered around nearby Foggy Bottom, a neighborhood largely owned now by this voracious school. By the time they graduate, many of the students will have accumulated daunting, even debilitating amounts of debt, though degrees and career prospects will presumably justify this burden. A homeless man, Caucasian like many of the students, bearded like a few, and not much older than the average, rummages through the park's garbage bins. He shares what little he finds with the pigeons that surround him. Then he reclines among his parcels on a bench, pulls a book from one of the bags, and begins to read. And let's see. The third selection of the four is titled Poet's Walk. And it begins with an epigraph by Boris Pasternak. I am fond of this, thy stubborn project, and to play my part I am content. I leave my desk defeated in another useless battle, no energy, no inspiration. The day is dreary and drizzling, but the air outside might help. I walk into the gloom, umbrella open, directionless. Up Wisconsin Avenue, above Calvert Street, looms the Russian embassy, gated like an iron gate, one side of the new Cold War, gated like an iron curtain, one side of the new Cold War. Seeing it reminds me of the nearby walk of Russian arts, the Poet's Walk. I turn a corner, pass a playground, descend the few stairs, and am there. The memorial consists of 10 marble markers, names and dates engraved like tombstones. Alexander Pushkin, Mikhail Lermontov, Fedor Tyutchev, Afanasy Fet, Alexander Blok, Nikolai Gumilev, Anna Akhmatova, Osip Mandelstam, Marina Svetaeva, Boris Pasternak. I place a rock on each marker, ascend the steps, then head home, past the open playground and the guarded dark windows of the embassy, down Wisconsin, toward the Potomac. The sky is brightening. And the last poem I'll read is called Gazing One Evening into the Potomac. Gazing one evening into the Potomac, I saw the swirling tumult of us, whose lives are not linear, as I once thought, whose existence instead ebbs and flows, back then forth, one stage into another, pulled like this tidal river by the turning moon, whose cratered eyes watch our movements, insistent, instinctive, chaotic. That clouded moon, whose shadowed eyes see into our dreams, into our plans, into our accomplishments and failures, into our projects yet undone, projects founded on more youthful ambitions to make names for ourselves here in this city, before flesh dissolves, before that swirling tumult stops, before the flow of us falls back at last into order. Thank you.
All right, David, thank you so much. When I was reading your bio and it started with your self-description as a person who writes about place or thinks about place, I wasn't quite sure how that would manifest. But I think it actually sounded, I could really relate in a lot of ways because, we live here in New York City. We're in Queens, but, as particularly the first piece of your work you read about the tour groups and the memorials and one of the things that's so fascinating about living in a big city, and especially an international city, DC probably, possibly even more so than New York, but they're probably equal in terms of tourism, is the sense that everyone who's coming through and passing through is coming at it with a completely different context. And the fact that you can sit there and really try to think like, oh, what must it be like for someone from that other country that our country has this history with that's problematic or difficult to come here and want to see our, old buildings and look around and things like that. And I loved the poem you read about the homeless man as well, because that's another sort of taking the time to really see people that maybe everyone else is able to walk by. The fact that you point out that he is not that much older or any older maybe than the college students, and is, sort of there but for a few circumstances of life, should be one of them maybe. It just really, there's such like it's place, but it's a really deep level of humanity at the same time. And I just really appreciated that. Now you mentioned, I'm curious though, because you said you write about place. You mentioned you live most of the year in Washington, D.C. Where else do you go?
To upstate New York, to Oneonta.
Oh, okay.
My family and I spent 12 years there full time, and absolutely love it. So when we retired, we found ways to go back, and that's where I got involved with the poetry group, and it's just been wonderful. And so I feel like I have a foot in two worlds. And the last poem that I didn't read, but that's in the chapbook, is about the difference between Washington and Oneonta, beyond just size and the obvious things. So had there been more time, I could have read that too.
Well, that's all right. We really appreciated it. And, Noli just posted a link in the chat if anyone would like to go pick up that book. And I think, I personally would love to hear more of it's one of these things where every once in a while, everyone approaches creative works differently, and everyone has their own voice and all of those things. But I love when I got just I felt at least like I got such a clear picture of what you would be thinking if you were like sitting on a park bench watching people go by. And I just think that's wonderful. So I am personally curious to find out more. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
Sure. All right. So we had a bit of a bobble at the beginning. That is okay. We improvise, adapt, overcome. Any other words? It doesn't matter. All right. So I think next we will go to Julene Waffle. She is a teacher in a rural New York State public school, a business owner, a wife, a mother of 3 boys, and a writer. She has degrees from Hartwick College and Binghamton University. Her work has appeared in the Daily Star, the English Journal, the English Record, River, Blood, and Corn Literary Journal, A Community of Voices, and the anthologies Planet in Crisis, Seeing Things, and a chapbook entitled So I Will Remember. She finds inspiration in nature and in her family, which includes her dogs. So, Julene, you should be able to unmute, and I understand you may also have a piece of Vicki's to read beforehand.
I do. I have 2 of Vicki's. I'll read. They're shorter. This one is in her book, Caught Before Flight. They both are. And this one's called The First Time. I took your makeup case heavy with Barbies and ran as far as the oleander's Pepto pink poison, as far as the shuttered house of the man who hated children, as far as Stop, where a child in a hurry could get run over, as far as the palm frond fort of the feral, wild-eyeing the sandy road, no beach to avoid his wrinkly one-eyed sea snake. If I'd kept running, I'd have made it to the river road, which, a right, and I'd be lost to the head shops you haunted, patchouli, incense, straw flowers, to the blue glow black lights. Those were my options. I was 4, Mother. But I could not bear the weight of your case, Peppy the poodle led me back to the murder brothers who firecracker my critter pets, to the clenched dad tense as fists, to the canopy bed where every night I am ballerina leaping through air. And then the other one I'm going to read is called Jewels. I've returned from the east, and I cannot unsee my mother on her deathbed. She stares at the ceiling. Where are my children, my wayward grains of coffee, my bits of bone, my jewels? I do not say, here, mother, do not leave me without you. Life means nothing. My boy chases sparrows around the patio. I sip $6 coffees. Stay-at-home moms in cashmere sweatpants checks for lipstick on their capped teeth. Do they understand that the jewels they bird down their gilded throats are worthless? And that's Vicki's. And if everybody could send her some happy thoughts and positive prayers, she wanted to be here and share tonight, but she's got a family emergency. Okay, so I'm going to read, and this is from my little book, so I will remember. And this one's called Grandma's Invitation. I can read a newspaper by the moonlight tonight. Looking out the window above the kitchen sink, it was her invitation to sit and watch dusk fall into night. Moon shadows dripped from branches like honey glaze on fresh baked biscuits, and breezes carried crushed fern and tree musk down the mountain. Peepers chirruped, bats swooped, and evening birds whispered the last of day. On nights like this, we'd sit on the porch amid unfinished chores in thin night dresses and slippers, ready for sleep. Eyes closed, she'd soak in the damp of night, and sometimes her lips would curl, flatten, or forming thoughts on air, but uttering no sound. Her white hair brushed out and standing on end, a crown of wisdom or a cloud of doubt. And me, afraid to listen, afraid not to, I'd watch her, hoping to learn something, but I couldn't tell what, except I wish I had asked. And this one's called The Spider I Could Not Kill. My mother hated spiders. She would call me from play to murder the wee hairy beast, and I would, because I loved her. Much later, from her hospital bed, unable to speak, she'd aim her finger at the air. I could only guess, a spider? Searching the covers, scanning the floor, I could not find her fright. That large and downy creature memory made her flinch and wince. She could not recognize me, but she recognized that fear. So I shooed the thing I could not see, swatted it to no avail. I cooed calming words she could not believe, and because I could not kill it, I conjured a box and captured it inside. The last spider I had to kill was for my dying mother, and I could not imagine it. This one's called Full of Sorry. The Harriman rest stop passed my window in a blur of fumes and noise and mist of memory. The bumblebee flew in the window of our '78 Blazer with blunder and surprise in his tail. He bounced off my chest like a pinball on a bumper and stung the doll in my lap. With one hand on the wheel, Dad swerved at my scream while the other grabbed Doll's leg to throw her and dress and Bee out the window, as if she were a grenade he had to save me from. He must have heard the change in my cry and stopped himself at the last, but the arrested jerk was too much for the string that held Doll's plastic head in place, and it vaulted from her body as it caught a gust out the window on Route 17. Afraid of that window's drawing draft, I pressed myself deep into the seat. I watched the side view mirror as her head bounced off the side of the road and vanished into the grass. He didn't stop, never even feathered the brake. There's too much traffic, he said. I couldn't bear the sorry on his face. so I turned my back and cried. I couldn't curse his way with war, so I clasped Doll close and whispered confessions of sorry. I'm so sorry, into the cavern of her neck. This one is called I Remember You. I don't remember what I ate or drank at dinner. The faces at my table are blank O's, but I remember you. My gut ached, dull, then pulsing, dangerous, something halting like a deer that jumps out of a mist, a sudden panic and breaks, glaring taillights, the only evidence it was there. Like smoke, I rose from my seat, trying to keep my insides from spilling out, palms pressing heavy on belly, pain plucking innards. I sat in the privacy of the public ladies' room, door locked, urine spilled from me, then something else, something larger than a butter bean, a bloody comma in the clear water. I didn't even know you were there. Between the molecules of air for behind the lock, there were muffled clinking glasses, floating laughter, a knock on the door, panic, another knock, a pause, a comma. I flushed. I returned to the table. I don't know who I was with or if I ate, but I remember you. Here's a little shorter one. Apples, peaches, pumpkin pie, if not ready, holler I. Giggles ricochet like BBs off trees and stones between calls of you're it and I got you. They are in the between, hanging like curtains, ruffling in open windows, glimpses of possibility and the familiar at once. The child peeking behind skin-knee tears, and the teenager trying on lonely like an evening gown found in the back of mother's closet. How long will they giggle without shame? How long will their teeth gleam fearlessly in the moonlight? This is one called From Under an Umbrella of Stars. From under an umbrella of stars, we scan the myths of sky. Neowise hangs from Canis Major. By its long comet tail, a shoot of sparks and light. Saturn pigeoned in the eye of a telescope, golden rings around a golden planet. Jupiter and its brassy bands rising above, and yet my child, stepping from the lens, stares down into his empty hands, as if thirstily gulping the air with his eyes. Then suddenly he searches me, his Arcturus, his bear guard, his own star eyes shining, and says in whispered awe, it is as if I could hold them in my hands. In that pause, even the crickets stop singing. And the last one is a teeny tiny one. It's called Stargazing. I am a quilt my child wraps himself in against the chill of night. He nuzzles his chin into my chest and I close around him. Burying my nose into his hair, I breathe. The stars can wait. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Julene. Those were beautiful. Really such wonderful imagery and a few turns of phrases in there. The thing that really got me was there were two. One was the question about children, something to the effect of, and you can correct me, how long will they laugh without shame? And that's like, to me, that's almost like the question of like, when are they going to grow up? Like, but not in a, when are they going to grow up? Like I'm annoyed with what they're doing. Like in a sense of like, I really hope they can hold on to this, because when people eventually learn to either conceal or have self-consciousness surrounding these things, like I feel like I just got a loss of innocence vibe a little bit, from the perspective of the person watching, your voice in the poem. And then the other, was the poem about the miscarriage as well. I think was just, that's something, it's been on my mind a lot lately. Just random. This is my sister-in-law's second holiday season being pregnant. in a row, and it's because last year they lost one. And it's something, I think it's one of those experiences in life that so many people haven't some experience of, yet also we have no effective sort of built-in vocabulary for to talk about. And even the idea that after something like that happens, you know, the narrator would then just go back to dinner and try to get on with the day or whatever, but have that sort of hang in the background. um yeah, I mean, that's really powerful and really evocative, and I think is uh a useful way to sort of explain maybe the emotions or the difficulties presented by that situation. um so I just wanted to say I appreciated that. And then also, you know, your work in general, I loved that it had such a focus on what I guess what I'm coming to understand as I become more and more of an adult is the important stuff in the world. um, you know, maybe less so the because you know, you start a poem about stars and it's like, well, you could, yeah, I guess there's probably been hundreds of lines of poetry written about the glory of the heavens and the, you know, using these high flung phrases and mythical references to Atlas and all this stuff. But ultimately, what actually matters is the relationships in a person's life and their family, their children, their friends, all these things. So I just wanted to say that really came across clearly, and I really appreciated it. So,
Well, thank you.
sure. All right. And Noli, again, posted a link there to you on Twitter, your website, and the book is available now. So people go get these things. I don't know if the publisher has like a package deal. I know that would have been, maybe we could have put that together. Anyways, oh, okay. Sorry. I get, my brain gets like torn in half sometimes because I leave the chat open, and maybe I shouldn't because I'm supposed to be talking and hosting and stuff. Uh, at any rate, our third reader tonight, or I guess fourth reader, we have one here in spirit, is Lyden Keeman. You heard from her earlier, but now I believe she's going to share some of her own work. She is a writer living in upstate New York. She she studies poetry with Robert Benson and the Seeing Things Writers Group. Publications include Seeing Things Anthology and More Than a Handful, both published in 2020 by Woodland Arts Editions. After a career in New York City theater, dance medicine, biopsychology, teaching and advising psychology majors at Hunter College, Dr. Kemen moved to the Great Western Catskills with her husband and 3 cats. In addition to her writing, she serves on the Bright Hill Press Board of Directors and several other not-for-profit organizations. All right, Lynne, you should be able to unmute and take us away.
Thank you. Thank you for having all of us. I don't know if at the end we get to say thank yous, but let me just say right now that Robert Benson, who is our publisher and our writing workshop leader, has been amazing. David Hayes did graphics for us. Vicki Whicker did the cover to my chapbook called More Than a Handful. And working with a group during the pandemic has just been amazing. I can't imagine how I would have gotten through this without this incredible group of very supportive people. Okay. The first poem I'm going to read is called Revisiting. The familiar, yet not familiar. The pool in the stone step, expecting the sour smell of cigarettes and the whisper of mothballs. But there's emptiness. Finally, 40 years later, and they are gone. The arts and crafts doorknob is still there. The nearly black cedar paneling is whitewashed. The furniture is IKEA and not theirs. But the door knocker remains, and the stained glass sconces still hang. The rooms are smaller, yet lighter, and the pantry has been expanded into a comfortable family room with skylights. The architect tells me that he is a master of fenestration. No icebox of pale green, no freezer chest with garden vegetables frozen, waiting to be overcooked to gray. I think I hear a faint Nebraska accent calling my name, but no. The cot is gone, and with it, the scary Cornell plaque that looked like a wild monster in the dark, whose shadow kept me in my narrow bed, afraid to put foot to cold floor. The house is smaller. It's mine and not. The ceilings have gotten shorter, as did the people over the years. And there are both older and younger ghosts. You can't see them if you look directly. You have to use peripheral vision or reflections from the copper pots that are no longer there. In the mirror that isn't there, in the bubbled leaded glass. And of course, the green carpet on the stairs has vanished. The varnish has vanished. Why did they use that color? And where's the desk with the hidden space for important papers? I say my thanks and leave them to their IKEA furniture, to their lives in my past life. The second poem is called Gazing. The glass is wavy and some panes have bubbles that make looking through them so much more fun. Mom's magnifying glass lies on top of her magazines and books. I've never seen her read a new book or a library book, but she's always reading, and the reading glass is always smeary. There's also a globe on the table with a snowman stuck inside. It has some sort of fluid that has bubbles on top, and there are stiff snowflakes floating in there that have gotten clumpy over the years. I look through all the kinds of glass as the light from the fireplace wraps the room in orange flames. Night is so dark here, but an occasional car lights the slanting snow and the tire chains jingle as they pass. The turtle. My father found him by the side of the road and brought him home. He lived in the backyard. I think he was happy to have been rescued from traffic. He looked impossibly old and did long, slow blinks of his eyes. I lay on the grass and watched him for hours. I loved to look at his beautiful domed shell. It was gold and light brown with funny swirly ridges that I liked to trace with my hand. It reminded me of seashells. He often pulled his head in and disappeared, all except the shell, especially when all of the neighborhood kids came to look. No one outdoors spoke quietly. Voices rang and bounced off the shafts of sun. I don't blame him for pulling away. One morning I found him smashed. Tommy Matichek said that Patty McGinnis leaped on his shell. It was not Patty's first crime, nor would it be his last. Patty later jumped on women and broke their spirits. I hated him with all my heart. Origami. It arrives in a beautiful square stack of Japanese patterns, block print, indigo blue, traditional waves, orange and green koi fish. On the reverse side, intense complementary hues. Here is where I will write my Reiki prayers. The accompanying book is for beginners. Make a crane, a cup to hold wishes, a house to shelter in, a kite to fly. Fold the corners of the paper sharply. Reiki prayers, papers to protect those I love, friends who need an embrace. We have to settle for creased paper wishes. Folded, they sit in a bowl whose wishes and prayers, a place to focus. I stir it when I pass. It's something on the back burner of my mind. If only I could place my hands on your shoulders, hold your hand, share my life energy with you, fold you in a pinwheel of love. I go outside and touch my flowers and wish it was you. One day we're here, the next we're gone. Primary colors, primitive wishes to be turned into beautiful, comforting shapes. In this strange time of origami instead of vaccine, I wish us health and safety. We fold ourselves into shapes of comfort and recognition. I write a prayer on the back of each sheet and stir my bowl. The paper and ink are often too dark to see what's written. but it's there, gently simmering, folding and unfolding. I hope I won't need a bigger bowl. And the final poem that I'm going to read is called The Best Advice. It was August of 1969, time for me to leave for my first year of college. I hugged my grandmother goodbye, looking for my exit, excited and impatient to go. Her spine was bent, her hands were red and swollen, joints distorted. She was very slow. I couldn't wait to go. Just one thing, study hard, choose your friends carefully, and don't forget, more than a handful is sinful. What could she know about life? A woman who lived in a too small, dying hamlet, self-educated, Presbyterian, humble, so very uncool. And yet 50 years later, I have never found a single case that defied her very best advice. Thank you.
All right, Lynn, thank you so much. Really, the one that I think sticks with me is the origami. You know, that's just topical, right? I mean, all of the rest, you know, there were many things that were relatable in there, but that one particularly, the exact feeling of being unable to touch and really be with people, whether it's because they are no longer with us, whether it's because we are scared of a disease, which, by the way, I don't mean to make that sound like we're not rightfully scared of a disease. We are rightfully scared of a disease and should stay home. Whatever the reason, you know, that this feeling of loss, of that basic human connection, yeah, I think really is something everyone can feel right now. I mean, it's the reason, you know, Trina and I started this. It's the reason that I do things like call my friend and tell them to turn on Zoom, and then we'll watch the same movie at the same time, all that kind of stuff. And I think I love the idea of taking this sort of meditative practice of origami or any kind of, you know, tactile work, and trying to um, sort of infuse that with the intention of goodwill towards people. That's such a beautiful idea. So that one just really stuck with me. So is it, and I assume, is this something you've tried or have picked up during the pandemic, origami? If not, it's okay.
I used to do it. I'm not that great at doing it, but I do fold things into little books, and I do the very simple ones,
Mhm.
and I do write prayers, and I don't know, it seems to help me. I hope it helps the other people.
Sure. And I think honestly, you know, I think regardless of getting into, you know, the metaphysical, whether or not it changes the universe, I think these are things where our intention, goodwill, um, whatever words people choose to use for them, does have some beneficial factor, even if it's just to us and the people directly around us during this. And I think that's been one of the hardest things during this time, this, you know, past almost year now, has been that sense of what is it that we can do, you know, what is it, what's an action I can actually take. And so I think, you know, an action like that, an action like uh we've sent more postcards this year than I think we ever have before. Ever we've sent more birthday cards than we ever have before, you know. All of those I think are just so important. And I think, you know, one of the things I always say, you know, regarding, I don't have any sort of literary education. I read a lot, and but I never went to school for it or anything. But one of the things I always say about poetry and non-literal, you know, writing is that it does something very unique, which is it can sort of reach behind me and push a button in me that I didn't know was there. And I think it's sort of just that element of someone else putting their finger on an emotion that I didn't know how to describe myself makes me feel deeply connected. So just wanted to say thank you for that. All right. So with that, the everyone who read tonight, Vicki, unfortunately, I guess she may, have had to go. She was here in spirit. I appreciate the readers helping her share her work. And we are all sending the very best of energies to her as much as we can. Hopefully everything's okay. But life happens. Things do happen. And we have to keep trying, right? That's what I was trying to say earlier. I think Joanna came up with really good synonyms for whatever it was I was trying to say earlier with the improvise, adapt, overcome. I think I need to scroll back in the chat and look at those. At any rate, briefly, in wrapping up the show, I'd just like to say thank you to the readers. Thank you to everyone who came and hung out and watched. And if you'd like to keep up with us, once again, we are on Twitter at TGIcast, or you can just go to the website, tgicast.com. If you'd like to find more of me on the internet, you can find me at my name, Ridge Cresswell, 2 S's, 2 L's on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I now post my nature photography at birdvert, like a bird pervert. I find that amusing. I don't know if anyone else does. If you'd like to reach out to the show's creator, Trina Thibodeau, you can find her on Twitter at Trina Tibbs, TREENATHIBS. And if you'd like to recommend someone for the show, if there's someone you know who you would like to hear, if you'd like to submit a piece to us for consideration in continued scheduling, you can reach out to Noli Reed. Probably on Twitter is the easiest, or your email, or what's the best way, you think? Email. All right, so you can email her at nolireed@gmail.com. For right now, we do keep the room open for a few moments after the show, or honestly, usually about an hour. So if anyone wants to hang out, ask anybody questions, comments, things like that, you can all feel free. And with that, we will just try to oh man, see, sorry, just really quick. I've been trying to come up with something to say at the end of this for a long time, and I can't really do it. We've had like this show runs on friendship. We've had a few. It just doesn't. I haven't found it yet. So what I'll say for right now is that I hope everyone stays safe, healthy, and happy. And please feel free to come back next week. We'll be here every week for the foreseeable future, with the exception of Christmas Day. We're taking that off, but we will be here New Year's Day. If you'd like to come, I guess, have a party or whatever, eat black-eyed peas. Depends on the part of the country you're in. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to stop recording.